Hello YouTube Pipers, Double O Pipe here, otherwise known as Rick. I am spilling out Carter Hall. Smells good. And this is a Royal Duke Dr. Graybow. I'm not sure that stem is the correct stem because it doesn't go all the way in. So I don't know what to say about that. But anyway, I'm going to load this into it, fire it up, then chat a bit. I hope everybody's doing okay. We have a beautiful day here, sunshiny, cool. I've had the windows open for the last couple of days, which is really nice. No air conditioning necessary. And getting some of that stuffy air out of this house. Need a window fan, I guess. And my last entry into this bowl, push it down with the thumb so it just springs up a tad. And I've got some draw on there. Returning all the excess. And now to light this up. Well, a couple of weeks ago I ordered some things from smokingpipes.com, and after they sent it out I checked to see how much I'd paid, and then I noticed that it was being shipped to my daughter. I don't know how that happened. So anyway, I had to get in touch with my daughter and ask her to send it to me once she got it, or else send it back to them. They said they would send it to me. So anyway, it's still somewhere in the mail. That's been over 2 weeks. I don't know when it's going to get here. I don't guess it matters. I wanted to talk about my first year in college, or was it my second year in college? My second year in college, took organic chemistry. Flunked it. But still I took it. But anyway, a friend of mine from high school, he and I were helping these two girls move from an apartment on James Island to one in town, or one from in town, one way or the other, I can't remember which way. But I thought we were moving them out because at their place they had this humongous glass bottle, hold like 20 gallons. Thick glass. The top was about like this. Huge. Take a huge cork. But she didn't want it. She said, "You can have that if you want it." And I got this big grin on my face, and George looked at me funny. He looked at me funny. And I said, "Yeah, I'll take that." So after we helped them move all their stuff, it took two of us to lift this thing and put it into the car, just barely managing to put it in the car. And I had this big grin on my face and started back to the house. He said, "What you going to do with that thing?" I said, "We're going to make beer." He said, "Huh? Beer?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "It doesn't take much. I learned something from organic chemistry." He said, "You sure you can do that?" I said, "Yeah, look at the size of that thing. We can make 20 gallons of beer." He said, "Okay, if you think we can do that." And I said, "Yeah. I'm getting a college education. I'm taking organic chemistry. I know what I'm doing." Well, I said, "I just don't know where we're going to hide this thing, because I don't think my parents would appreciate me making beer. Where do you think we can hide it?" And he said, "Well, remember, we've got that tree next to your house where we hid all that other stuff." I said, "Yeah, we did, didn't we? Okay, we can put it there." I didn't know that we had hid some liquor in there that a friend of ours had. That's another story. But anyway, it was a lot of liquor. And we had hidden it in this, there was like an opening in the tree. We just dropped it in. My dad had found that, but he just never said anything to me till years later. But anyway, we got to the house and we put the big glass, I don't know what you'd call this thing. It was just a humongous. Anyway, we got it hidden next to the tree and around in the bushes. And he said, "Well, what are we going to do now?" I said, "We're going to go up and get us some sugar and some malt extract. We can go up to the Piggly Wiggly and get that." He said, "They got beer fixings at the Piggly Wiggly?" I said, "Yes, sir. Let's go." So we drove up to the Piggly Wiggly. I said, "You get the sugar and I'll get the malt extract." And I was jumping because it was on the top shelf. Jumping to get it. Couldn't quite reach it. George, being a foot taller than me, reached up and got it. He said, "Why don't you get the sugar? It's on the bottom shelf." So I got the sugar. We went up to the front, put it down, paid for it. The girl said, "That's all you want?" We said, "Yeah." So we walked out with the bag, looking back, feeling kind of guilty, like maybe she knows what we're going to do, because we didn't know whether it was legal or not to make beer. But she was going about her business. She didn't care about us anymore. Well, we got back to the house, walked over to where the jar was, or the, I don't know what to call that thing, not flask, vat, big glass vat, maybe that's what we can call it. But anyway, walked over there and he said, "Well, what do we do now?" And I said, "Well, we pour in the malt extract and pour in the sugar." He said, "Well, that hole's going to be kind of small for all that pouring." He said, "We probably need a funnel." I said, "Yeah, you're probably right. Let's go up and get one." So we got in the car and drove up to the hardware store. Looked around and he found it and he said, "I got one. this ought to do fine. And I said, good, pay for it. Went out, hopped in the car, we were ready to go. And he said, well, you're going to need to cover that thing when we've got it all filled up. I said, yeah. He said, you think a cork will do? I said, yeah. So we got out of the car, walked back in, said, we need a big cork. I said, you guys were just in here. I said, yeah, we need a big cork now. He said, back in fishing department. So we walked back there, found one that we figured would fit. Got a couple because we weren't sure of the size. But anyway, paid for it, got out in the car, drove back home. Put the funnel in the opening. He said, I need a church key to open this thing with. I said, okay, I'll get it. Hang on. So I went in the house, got one of those. He punctured the top. Started pouring it into the funnel. He said, this is mighty thick. It's taking a long time. I said, well, I'm going to go get some water. So I went and got water. It helped dilute it and pour it down into it. And then we did the same with the sugar. I had walked back and forth like 50 times with a big pot full of water, poured it in. And he said, isn't there some better way to put water in here? I said, how about a hose? He said, okay, we'll try that. So I walked over and started walking the hose over to see if it would reach. Too short. I said, I guess we better go get a hose. So he popped the cork in that thing and we jumped in the car. Back to the hardware store. He said, you guys again? We said, yeah, we come looking for a hose this time. Well, Buddy went back there and found what he thought would work and came up, paid for it, went out, got in the car. Got back to the house. I went over and connected it to the end of the hose that was already strung out. Got it on there tight, walked over, turned it on, walked back over to where he was, and out was coming this sludgy brown water. And he said, Rick, I don't know about that. That just looks mighty bad. I said, it'll clear up in a minute. I said, besides, that yeast in that's making alcohol kills anything. He said, yeast? And I looked at him, I said, yeah, I didn't mention yeast. He said, no, you didn't. I said, okay. So I dropped the hose, walked over, turned it off. We both went and got in the car again, went up to the Piggly Wiggly. Got a bunch of bags of yeast. Paid for it. Girl looked at us real funny. So anyway, we walked back to the car, drove back home, and put the yeast in. Turned the water on. Filled it up. And he took the cork and he went, bam, bam. He said, this thing's got to be secure because we don't want anything getting into our beer. And I said, you're right, we don't. I said, we give that about 7 days and we're going to have us some beer. He said, that sounds good. So anyway, we went about our business for several days. And about the third day, we drove up and said, let's go look and see how it's looking. And as we walked over, we heard this bam! And then crack! I said, what the heck was that? And a small limb fell down beside the big vat. And he said, I don't know. We walked around there and the cork was gone. The fermentation process had built up so much CO2 that it had blown that cork out, and the cork had gone up in the tree, broken the limb, small limb, but still it had some pressure, that cork, and the limb had fallen down beside the vat. Well, the cork was gone. We couldn't find that anywhere. I said, We should have thought of that. CO2 buildup. He said, you're the beer making expert, Mr. Organic Chemistry. I said, yeah, I thought I was. We need some cloth or muslin or something to put over that and keep things from getting into it, and so that it has an area that the CO2 can escape. So he said, all right, where are you going to get that? And I went inside and I found something that we could put around it that was permeable to get all that CO2 out. Covered it up, made sure it was tight on there, and then went about our business for the next 4 days. Day 7 came up and I said, this ought to be the magic day. Let's go see what it looks like. We had called a friend and gotten a bottle cap attacher and a bunch of bottles because we planned on making, beer bottles with caps on them. So we had those lined up. We had the cap presser in place. And he said, well, let's get us some of that. And I stuck some hose, some plastic hose down there and sucked on it so that we could get a flow from there into the bottle. And I had it flowing, but I said, that is nasty. He said, you mean the beer's nasty? I said, I don't know about the beer, but all that grit that was on the top of it collected in my teeth. That's nasty. Anyway, once the beer bottle was filled, I put the hose back. And he said, there's a lot of stuff floating in there. I said, yeah, there sure is. He said, you're going to taste it? And I said, let's let it sit for a minute and let some of that stuff settle, and then we'll taste it. So we let it settle. And he said, okay, Mr. Expert, pick it up and try it. And I said, okay, and I smiled big. I said, here goes, first taste. And I took a big glug, and I went, I sprayed that stuff out of my mouth, and it just splattered him completely. And he said, what are you doing, Croucher? You just covered me in this stink. What is it? I said, that's the worst tasting beer I ever had. I said, here, you try it. He said, I don't know if I want to or not. I said, go ahead, try it. You can let it settle again if you want to, which he did. And then he took a mouthful, and same thing. He went, and all over me. He got me back. He said, that tastes like shit. I said, yeah. I said, that's probably the best word you're using, because that's the excrement from the yeast. So anyway, we said we might as well bottle this crap up. So we put it in all the bottles we had. Said maybe it'll taste better later. Said, yeah, hope so. All the bottles we had, we filled them up same way. Filled them up, capped them. I said, we better let the other guys taste them. I said, I don't think I want any more of that. He said, I don't think so either. But the rest of the guys wanted to try it, so we'll let them open a bottle and try it. So our buddies came over a couple of days later and said, where's this beer y'all been talking about? So I picked up one of the bottles and opened it up and went poof. I mean, it was still fermenting in that little bottle. So here it is. And he looked at it and said, that's mighty dark. What's all that stuff floating around? And he said, well, we're not sure what that is. But that's the beer we made. If you want to try it, try it. So he took a big glug and he went just like we did, spat it out. He said, "That tastes like shit." We said, "Yeah, that's what we thought too." And each of them that tried it spat it out and said the same thing. So we said, "I guess we're not going to do any more with this. Let's just pour it out." So we tipped the we tipped the vat, and it tipped over, and it must have hit a rock or something because it cracked, and all that stuff just spilled out in black sludge poured out onto the ground. I waited a couple of days before I cleaned up that glass that was broken. One of the guys took one and said, "I'm going to try something." So we watched him, and he walked over to where the creek was and threw it over across the creek against the side of a tree on the other side. And there was a big boom because it was like a small bomb with all that pressure on the inside. So we all took all of them over there, threw them all up against that tree, and each one of them was like a boom, splash, boom, splash. Well, all that fermentation was just permeating the air for the next few days from this ground over here from across the creek. And my dad walked out one of those days and said, "That smell, it must be a skunk over in the marsh or something." I said, "Yeah, that must be it, Dad." Knowing what it was. Oh, so much for our making beer. I had no clue what I was doing. And I think the guys realized that after tasting that stuff. I was playing it by ear, and my ear was off key, is all I can say. Oh, jeepers. So much for our beer making days. We still laugh about that. Well, hope everybody's doing okay. Hope your weather is nice. Hope you're taking your mind off world events. Because if you think too much about it, it just gets down in your soul and it's not good for you. There's nothing you can do about anything that's happening. Me, I retreat to the past in my memories. I don't know what your guys are doing. But I'm not going to rant and rave about it because there's no point. So if any of you want to make some beer, just let me know and I'll give you the recipe. Got to have a big vat. Take care of yourselves. I'll talk to you later another day. God bless you and goodbye until the next time.